Should Call of Duty be Hitscan or Projectile? This is a question I don't see anybody bouncing around. And it bothers me because I don't know if you guys have realized, but Warzone 2 will likely be its own client. Meaning Modern Warfare 2 won't have to do balance and gameplay related decisions based on the Battle Royale mode. That can be its own separate thing. And one of the issues people have been having in Call of Duty is that a lot of the weapon attachments and barrels, ammo types, whatever, change up your bullet velocity. So you might be enjoying a certain gun and then you tweak something around and you've either increased or decreased the bullet velocity, and then some of your muscle memory for distant targets kind of goes out the window. You aim ahead when you don't need to, you aim at them when you need to be aiming ahead of them. It's a little bit of a mess. It's one other thing to consider, and I personally like having more things to consider when I'm playing an FPS game, and bullet velocity is a really good way to stop people from mapping their opponents, or obviously taking people out across the map. If your bullets are hit scan and you have a low recoil SMG, then you can just sort of laser somebody across the map. It might take you 6 or 7 bullets, but you don't have to account for the lower bullet velocity. The other nice thing about projectiles is that it gives developers one more thing to tweak on a gun, and the more things you can tweak on a gun, the more you can fine-tune it, the better you can balance it, theoretically. If in Modern Warfare 2 there's an assault rifle that's really overpowered, you could take its bullet velocity from 900 meters per second down to 750 meters per second, which would hurt its effectiveness at long range against moving targets. If everything's hit scan, then that's off the table and you have to just start reducing damage range, changing up body multipliers. So there's still a lot of things you can fine tune. Recoil, of course, is one of them. Reload times, ammo counts. But bullet velocity just gives developers one more thing they can do to maybe make a gun worse without actually making it feel any different. So it would still have its iconic feel, but wouldn't be as good in certain situations, or it could be better in certain situations. The thing is, with bullet velocity as a mechanic, you have another variable that you have to deal with. And sometimes that variable is very frustrating to deal with, because instead of, oh, I'm not doing the right amount of damage, it's I didn't aim those couple meters ahead of them, or I aimed a little too far ahead of them, I overcompensated, and my bullets seem to just go into the ether, and it can make certain gunfights at certain ranges feel incredibly awkward. A lot of times Call of Duty gunfights go fast, and if you're using iron sights without a suppressor, muzzle flash, recoil, a moving target, it might in the moment feel like you're shooting somebody, but you're really not, and you don't know whether to blame lag, bullet velocity, or just your shitty aim. Hitscan makes muscle memory much easier to obtain because you're not worrying about what attachment you have that increases your bullet velocity. Instead, you just know that if your iron sight, red dot, scope, or whatever is on the person and you pull the trigger, you're supposed to get a hit. That way you know that if it doesn't hit, it's probably lag related and not a skill issue. Predictive recoil, which is going to be its own video, plus hit scan, makes your gun feel much more consistent to learn, and I think that can be rewarding. I think it can make a game more competitive, and I think it can alleviate some of the problems that, show up in gunfights. The problem is, if they were ever going to go back to full-on hit scan, they would have to genuinely increase the recoil of every gun so that we're not getting mapped across the map like we were in Modern Warfare 2019, that, it had projectile rounds and higher recoil than normal, but still, you could laser somebody with the right attachments on your M4 or your Kilo or even some of the SMGs. You see, you don't want people mapping you with assault rifles all the time, because then what's the point of using a DMR or a sniper rifle? You don't want people mapping you with an SMG, because then what's the point of using an AR? And that was the issue in Call of Duty Ghosts. If the MTAR X in Call of Duty Ghosts, or the Bison, or the Vector, depending on what moment in the meta you're in, if they would have had really low bullet velocity, I wouldn't have been able to map people with the MTAR X, the Vector, or the Bison. By the way, if the gameplay looks weird, it's because somebody donated on stream to make me play with 65 FOV, and I did it, so that's why it looks the way it does. So hitscan needs to be accompanied with increased recoil, but of course that recoil needs to be predictive, and there can't be any bloom. It's still skill-based, but you can't just full auto laser somebody across the map. And we also have to realize, because this game isn't going to be sharing the same client as Warzone most likely, in Modern Warfare 2, we probably won't have those crazy 60 round magazines. At least we won't need to have them, because Again, that was more of a Warzone decision. In standard 6v6 or even 10v10, you don't need 60 rounds of ammunition on a low recoil assault rifle with high bullet velocity, where you can just, again, map people with little to no worries. The smaller your mag, the less you're allowed to miss, so if we don't have 60 round magazines, but we have Hitscan with higher recoil that is predictive, I think we'll have a pretty skill-based setup. Where long-range combat with a fully automatic weapon is viable because it's Call of Duty, but it still requires recoil control in order to pull off properly. And you won't have 60 rounds to just spray at everybody, so you actually have to be accurate. The thing is, both Projectile and Hitscans have their own problems. I think Hitscan makes it a little too easy to fight outside your effective range, and Projectile leads to the inconsistencies I mentioned earlier. So what's the solution? Well, the solution isn't to make sure every one of your weapons negates the bullet velocity issue by increasing the bullet velocity within Gunsmith. I think they should go with a hybrid route. Within your weapon's effective range, I believe it should be Hitscan, and the developers can decide what that is. Basically how this would work is you fire the weapon, and if nothing is in the way of the Hitscan, after a certain distance it turns into a projectile. So maybe an M4 would have an effective range of about 35 meters, and the game could tell you that. After 35 meters, that Hitscan becomes a projectile. And that projectile then travels the rest of the way, and of course, it has all of the issues that a projectile has, where things can move out of the way of it, or you might have to track a target at that longer range. Meaning, when you use a weapon in its effective range, you have the most amount of consistency, where the game essentially just gives you Hitscan levels of precision, but as soon as you fight outside of it, that Hitscan becomes a projectile. Basically, the bullet would go instantaneously to 35 meters, it didn't touch anything, so then it's a projectile, and it moves along slowly. I believe Insurgency Sandstorm uses a system similar to this, but I could be wrong, so correct me if I am. This could add its own complications and inconsistencies, but it also could be the best of both worlds, where using the weapon properly feels really consistent, but out at a range requires a little bit more skill. I'm really mixed on this topic because a hybrid system has pros and cons, Projectile has pros and cons, and Hitscan has pros and cons. So I really don't know what the best is. Back in Black Ops 4, they did a patch where the SMGs, I believe all of the SMGs, became Hitscan, so that they would feel more consistent when you're using them, and I have to say, I remember loving that change. It made the SMGs feel so much more consistent in those close quarters, fast movement engagements. There's even something nice psychologically about knowing that your sight is on them, you pull the trigger, you get the hit marker, and you don't have to worry about your bullet coming out too slow. So I don't know, I'm mixed on the subject, but I'm curious to hear from you guys. I know this is a simple slap together video, but I had the question in my mind, I wanted to work it out in a commentary, and then ask you guys, what should Modern Warfare 2 have? Hitscan, Projectile, a hybrid system, or something entirely new altogether that only you have thought of? Let me know down in the comment section below. I'll see you when I see you. Goodbye. Wow, what a crazy gameplay commentary that was. There were so many twists and turns, I could barely keep up. But luckily, I have a nice Ewin Racing gaming chair to fall back into during times of stress, so I should be able to recover, and you can get one too. Use the link in the description, pop on over to Ewin Racing, and get yourself a new chair or desk on me, or at least 20% of it on me. Use code 1boom20 to save 20% on your order. I get kickback, you support a good brand, and everybody happy.